Trauma-informed embodiment. What is it? What does every embodiment teacher need to know about trauma? So we're going to look at today. So my name is Mark Walsh. I've been working in the field of embodiment for nearly 25 years. Most of that time I've also been involved with different types of trauma education. I started a charity in Ukraine most recently. I've advised NGOs, worked in about 6 different war zones on that. So how these two things intersect is kind of a specialist topic. First thing, there's sort of no excuse, I'd say now, for not being trauma-informed in the modern world, just being on YouTube, right? There's so much good stuff here now, you know, whether it's the classics like Peter Levine, Stephen Porges, polyvagal theory, Bessel van der Kolk, Gabor Mate, you know, the big names are big for a reason. You can educate yourself on the internet. I think you can also get a bit lost in that, and you can also become what I'm going to call trauma-deformed rather than just trauma-informed. All right, what's the first thing to say? Maybe it's just the relationship between the body and trauma. So there's a lot of ways to look at trauma, but one way is that it's a disconnection from ourselves, from each other, from meaning, from the whole world, really. But the start of that disconnection is the disconnection from the body. So what does that mean? Embodied work, reconnecting to the body, is potentially very, very healing and very, very useful. Another way of looking at it is that trauma is nervous system dysregulation. There's lots of good people on the internet talking about this, whether it's Debs Dana or Irene Lyons. There's so many good people these days. You can really educate yourself as to nervous system health. Trauma is one aspect of that. So coming back to the body may be a way to better regulate oneself, certainly on the self-regulation, and that as a basis for co-regulation. So I think this is the first thing to say, right? And this is sort of almost like a but here, yeah? Is that the body isn't necessarily a sort of safe, happy place for people with trauma. So a mistake a lot of embodiment teachers can make is to say, the body's great, keep coming back to the body is your happy place. It's like, well, it might not be. The body may in fact be a source of pain, it may in fact be a source of dysregulation, it may be an uncomfortable sort of area for people, particularly if they have trauma and that trauma relates to the body, you know, some violation, things I can't say on YouTube, you get the idea. Okay, so what does it actually mean to be trauma-informed as someone who does embodied work, as an embodied coach, embodiment yoga teacher, whatever it is? I think certainly knowing about trauma, so knowing the symptomology of trauma. You know, you're not there to diagnose people. If you're an embodiment teacher, you're not certified, qualified to do that. But certainly understanding what some of the symptoms are, you know, understanding the range of, say, hyper-arousal symptoms, what that might look like. You know, that's important if you're doing sort of calming work or any kind of like relaxation yoga class or something like that, to know what those symptoms can look like. Also to know what the numbing symptoms to look like. So numbing is this disconnect from the body, understanding it might not be easy for people with trauma, you know, whether it be intergenerational or personal, to feel the body, yeah? So it's like, it's easy, just feel the body. Like I hear embodiment teachers sort of saying, just feel, and it's like, people are like, you know, they're numb. Yeah, they've got that armoring, they've got that close down of the body. So I think understanding some of the symptomology, the reliving symptoms, a sort of third set of the 3 sets of PTSD symptoms. Unless people have like hardcore trauma, like flashbacks and things, it's unlikely to happen. But it's good to know about, right? I think the other thing is to understand things like consent and calibration. This is 2 ethical principles we work with on our coaching course. Like being really impeccable with consent. I think this is particularly important if people have been violated. So many years ago, and I think it still exists in some circles, but it's got a lot better, yoga teachers would often sort of touch you without permission, adjust you without permission. There wasn't really consent for your bodily integrity. And this was coming from these sort of Asian guru type traditions. The guru knows best, and it's just not consent conscious. Now, I think you can overdo that. It can become kind of almost creepy when people are like, can I touch you in the hand area? And it's like, well, just shake hands, come on, chill out. So I think we can overdo that, but basically being impeccable, being very consent conscious as an embodiment teacher is super important, so we're not increasing that violation. The other thing to know about is that people may have a sort of learned helplessness there. There may be a learned passivity or a learned like over-agreeableness, people pleaser. So as a teacher, I'm looking for real consent, right? Rather than just someone who says yes, but the body's seizing up or retreating or going into a fight-flight response, yeah? Certainly as an embodiment teacher, you should know your way around fight, flight, freeze responses, you know, the different kind of responses people have as a result of stress that relate to trauma. Well worth knowing about, yeah? Calibration, key embodiment principle. So this is what's too much, what's too little. am I overdoing it? There's exercises I would do with one coachee and not to another, in certain contexts, not in another context. Like, it sounds like a tremendously simple thing, but what's too much is a big deal if someone has trauma. Yeah. One definition of trauma I've heard actually is, too much, too soon, too often. Like, that's almost a definition. So knowing that you're working within what's called the window of tolerance, that's a bit therapeutic. I sometimes think like window of learning or window of play may be a better term for those of us who aren't therapists. I think that's important. Okay, so working with consent and calibration, super important part of being trauma informed, knowing the basic symptomology. I think it's also good to know other modalities that are out there. So you may be a yoga teacher and understanding that, body isn't always a happy place, feeling isn't always easy, people may have this hyper-arousal that makes them calm down. Great, right? Trauma-informed yoga would involve some of those things. Well worth knowing if you're a mindfulness teacher. Trauma-informed mindfulness, David Trevelyan, check him out. And knowing when to sort of say, you know what, you might want to look at this. Yeah, so I'm a coach, I'm working in a coaching modality. I'm assuming a sort of level of adult robustness. I think we actually have a risk where we take on too much from the therapy world, where if you think about it, if someone's going to therapy, they're saying, I have a problem, I'm broken in a way, right? I might not say it so literally, but it's essentially that. I'm not sure we want to take that on. I certainly see, this is what I call trauma-deformed rather than trauma-informed, an oversensitivity, a sort of treating people with kid gloves, and it can just get a bit weird. I think we don't have to go that far, and part of that is knowing when to sort of refer, when to say, hey, there's such a thing of EMDR or TRE or somatic experiencing or NUM. If you don't know what those things are, look them up, right? To spend a couple of hours as an embodiment teacher looking up different practices, talking to different people about different embodiment stuff they've done, different trauma modalities that have helped them, like EMDR's and eye movement one that helped me, for example. And know when, you might want to look at this. I'm not able to diagnose you. I'm not here to judge you, but you might want to take a look at this. Yeah, it looks like you've got some things that may be trauma related, and gently and compassionately moving people in the direction of therapy where it's needed without, as I said, without getting neurotic about it. I think the other thing is people have got sort of overly politicized about it. The trauma world is often coming from the sort of hard left of American culture. Now, if you're on the hard left of American culture, you still need to hear this, okay? If that's you, great, that's your politics, that's where you're at, great. The rest of the world isn't, right? If you want to have people in your yoga class who are, say, a bit more conservative, maybe they're policemen that want to demonstrate, want to benefit from your kind of work in meditation or embodiment, military, or just normal people who are just not from Portland, right? It's important we don't try and enforce this kind of hard left intersectional politics on people. I wouldn't call that being trauma-informed. I'd call that pushing a political agenda, sort of under the cover of trauma. Where I live, for example, I'm in Slovenia, like people don't buy into that whole worldview here. It's just a bizarre, sort of slightly foreign worldview to most people here. So that is well worth knowing, is a lot of the trauma teachers, not all of them, but a lot of them do have this very strong sort of political affiliation agenda. It's just a bias, really, like any others. Okay, so what are the important things to know about? Basics of trauma, nervous system well-being, that's something you can learn about. We do some of that. There's other people online who do that, what trauma can look like. I think I'd say like trauma can look like way more than you think, right? Like I was working with a team that I manage in Ukraine recently, and I saw trauma come up in their learning styles. Maybe some people have scarcity and they take all the notes and they want to get everything. It's this feeling of not enoughness, right? So that's going to impact in a learning environment. Their perception, seeing danger where there isn't any danger, seeing threat where there isn't, their relationship to the body, not being able to feel or really being hypersensitive. The thing about trauma is that it can express in so many different ways, right? It's not just like the classic things like flashbacks or something. It could be like bodily aches and pain. It could be your worldview, how you see things, right? Your negativity bias in thinking about things. It can be so many things. So I would say it's worth understanding that the impact of trauma can be very wide-ranging, and it's definitely bodily, whether it's in that hyper-arousal, the numbing, or some sort of combination of the two. So it's going to affect you as an embodiment teacher. So yeah, I think that's the basics. I think don't get neurotic about it. Don't get paranoid. I see some people almost like scared to work with the body. I think as long as we're sensible, we're working with some of those basic ethical principles of consent and calibration. Polyvagal theory is well worth looking at as a sort of basic framework, I'd say as well. I would highly recommend Deb's Data's books, for example. There's sort of no excuse for not being trauma-informed now. As an embodiment teacher, we don't have to go over the top about it, but everyone should definitely know the basics of this stuff.